In the recent budget discussions, special education has been mentioned as one impact on the general education budget. Today, we will highlight how special education is funded and why it has been such an impact on the general education budget. If we are successful, then you, the learner, will understand how the various funding streams comprise special education funding and how special education services impact the general education budget. You'll also be able to name 3 funding streams for special education. You'll name the single largest factor impacting the special education budget, and you'll be able to explain why special education services are impacting the general education budget.
So in the 5 or 6 times that Laura and I have done this presentation, we've got a lot of great questions. And Laura and I both believe that special education should be a topic on the budget talks this go around this school year. However, it should not have as much negative connotation as we've been hearing about. As an example, last spring, not this spring, but the previous spring, the district was looking for about $1 million in reductions. And we, in February, came up with a spreadsheet that indicated $1 million of areas that we could reduce things. And that was pretty early in the budgeting process that year. And then by the end of May, we had added almost every single dollar back to the budget because of enrollment trends were increasing. So, and then by about November of this past fall, we had increased our spending by over $1 million because, again, of new costs to special education. So cost should never be a complaint or a concern in our opinion, but it is a trend. And when the district is up enrollment and we're up number of special education student enrollments, our opinion is that the special services department is not doing anything wrong, but we're responding to a need. And I think people in this district should avoid using things like overspending. Again, we're responding to a trend, we're responding to a need, and special services is an expensive service at times, but it's a needed service, it's a required service. Free appropriate education is truly a thing. And as Laura did in her setup, she indicated that there are some problems with some funding streams. So the first thing to really talk about is maintenance of effort. And that's what this slide is about. It is explaining that every district in the state of Minnesota must maintain effort. And what that basically means is you must spend $1 more in next year's budget for special education than you did this year. And in the upcoming slides, you're going to see some great evidence of data that we've put together for the slide presentation that shows our increasing costs. So that's what maintenance of effort is. And we received a memo. I received it, John Magus received it a couple months ago, and it indicated that we did meet maintenance of effort for the fiscal years that they analyzed was FY24 and FY25, and we increased our spending by $4.5 million. So in that case, we made maintenance of effort. Next slide, Laura.
You want to talk, Jason, while we're here about what happens if we don't maintain our effort?
Yeah, the district can take back funds. It could be a corrective action plan where they provide some training to the district as well, but definitely holding back funds.
All right. To answer our first success criteria, we're going to hit some of the funding sources for special education next. Our first one is our federal funds.
So the federal funds have been relatively stable since I've been a director for 16 years. We have received about $3 million over the course of those 16 years. It hasn't changed much. And in my opinion, it's a little bit of politics happening right now when the state of Minnesota would like to find opportunities to save $250 or $300 million of savings in the area of special education spending. I think the state of Minnesota is telling the federal government you should be contributing more. We're not going to read every bullet point, but this highlights the different funding codes and the pots of money that come straight into the district. And if we code, for example, my salary is fully coded to federal funds because we can optimize 100% reimbursement for federal funds. Every dollar you claim under that category, we get 100% reimbursement up to that about $3 million.
Another funding source for us is our state funding.
So this is the second special education reimbursement that we're talking about here, and state funding is our largest source of reimbursement. And superintendent, other people have talked to the school board quite a bit about this, and it is true that 50 to 62%, it's fair to say that we get about 60% reimbursement. Well, then 40% of that, that's the cross subsidy, is paid out of the general education fund. For every position that's coded, we only get about 60% reimbursement, and the general fund pays for 40%. You can see the trend line down at the bottom of this slide. The bullet points indicate FY24 spending was around $30 million, and it went in FY25 to 34, and then this year we're spending at a reimbursement rate of 36.4. That's an increased trend line that's quite surprising, alarming, but it correlates to increased students in special education, increased students qualifying for special education services, and some of the most at-risk students that our enrollment trends have been increasing are because some of our local schools are basically closing down some of their Setting 3 programs, and we're seeing an influx of those students in our Setting 3 classrooms here in Duluth. And some of those students have some of the most complex needs, which makes them more expensive students. Nothing wrong with what that is, but it's a factor that is increasing our spending. Another really interesting point, that the reimbursement doesn't catch up. We don't actually see the funding for 2 years. Like right now, if we're spending at 36.4, we're only getting reimbursed this year at that $30 million rate. And that's because of the calculations. The funding formulas don't catch up to you real time, actual time. It takes a 2-year lag for that funding stream to catch up with the state spending. That's another problem with the funding formula.
And so that additional $6 million that we're spending right now is coming out of the general education budget. Another source of funding that we have are what we call specialized funding. And what we're going to highlight here is not all the specialized funding that we receive as a district, but maybe some of our highest pots of money. The first one is CEIS funds.
So we've been doing coordinated early intervening services for as long as I've been a director. In the first years where I was a director, we were spending this funding source on American Indian advocates, and we still have American Indian advocates in the district. They're just not paid out of this funding stream because we are now mandatory, after we started receiving memos for disproportionate suspension rates, mandatory to spend money to prevent that phenomenon in the district. We're trying to reduce those suspension rates, especially among students of color, and we have 6 positions that are paid for out of this to do alternative to suspension programs. That program has radically reduced our suspension rates across the district. However, we're improving our white suspension rates equally, if not more, than our students of color suspension rates. And so we still need to work on this project, and if we did not receive those memos and have disproportionate rates, we could spend this money differently. We could go back to spending it on American Indian advocates. But right now, we're currently spending it on those positions which are targeted towards alternative to suspension programs.
And another specialized funding source that we receive is ADSES. This is the Alternative Delivery of Specialized Instructional Services. You'll note from this slide, and Jason has shared, that we've been receiving ADSES funding for about 10 years. At that time, it was not well known across the state, and so there were not many districts accessing this funding stream. That has changed as more and more districts are looking for funding streams to support students across the state. Now, this is off the chart. There's a graph that the state will show on accessing ADSES funding, and it starts from way down here, and it's off the chart now for the number of districts in the state that are accessing this funding stream. We receive close to $800,000 or $900,000, and this is a matching fund, so we only receive about 55% reimbursement. So the other part of this money, the 45%, comes out of the general education budget. And we use this funding to support students in math and reading at our 9 Title elementary schools. So schools on the east side, you'll see them listed there, that don't have other options through Title funds or or various funding streams to provide intervention services to students. I suspect, as to what Jason has already alluded, that when the governor is looking for places to cut almost at a rate of $300 million special education funding, it's very likely that this might be a funding stream that in the future is impacted by those cuts. Just something that we are watching as they or the state or the governor is looking for places to cut special education funding. And really, just as a reminder, the intent of the ADSES funds is to prevent students from qualifying for special education. It's to provide intervention so that students don't need special education services. And so that's the intent of this funding stream. Another funding stream is, Jason calls it ACTI, and it is, you'll see about $500,000 worth of funding that we receive.
So this, we can code things that relate to secondary transition activities, courses that are taught in the secondary schools, and 18 to 22 programming. Some of our positions are coded to this funding stream. Just yet another example of specialized funding sources that can pay for things that correlate to the activities that we need to provide as a school district. This one, I'll take it, Laura. This is just a list of other things that the district has participated in. The local collaborative time sampling brings in LCTS funds, and that's local collaborative time study funds. And these are monies that generate things that we paid for the PACE labs at Denfeld and East High School, which cost just at a starting point of $50,000, were paid for by the collaborative time study. Check and Connect, I was a part of the first director that wrote the grant for this. We brought in originally $800,000, and we didn't start actually paying for positions in our first few years because we were still in exploration, collecting some more data, making decisions around which evidence-based practice we wanted to go with, and we ended up choosing Check and Connect. And then we started paying for the coordinator and some mentor positions with that first $800,000. And most recently, we've had a partnership with St. Louis County, who has given us $3 million. All those external funding sources have gone away. We're still going to have Check and Connect in the district next year, but we've shrunk down dramatically. All of the positions are paid for by ISD 709 at this time. No external funding sources are going to help us pay for the positions that we're going to continue to have in the district next year. I won't read them all, but low incidence funds, we have some early childhood projects that we've partnered on. Each one of these projects create an enormous amount of data collection, and our business manager, Brenda Vietz, does a lot of data collection for the district related to these, because you're taking part of something that the state of Minnesota would like to see a return on these projects. So they want evidence of student growth, student improvement. Hopefully students aren't qualifying for special education services with some of these projects, but it does take a tremendous amount of effort by the district whenever we partner with them on some of these projects.
Jason, in our presentations, you've highlighted and emphasized the success we've had with Check and Connect. Do you want to share that information here?
Yeah, I'm super proud of the Check and Connect program. We've done that project with what we call Fidelity. We have reports that we send off to MDE, and they appreciate those reports. If you are a part of the Check and Connect program, you'll have a 99% success graduation rate. That's what we've seen with the Check and Connect program. It's very high success rate. When you're involved with that program, you're going to graduate. I won't spend too much time on these, but we just wanted to highlight that everything we do in our department, we have to code it correctly. And you'll see this one's highlighting an ASD, autism spectrum disorder teaching, setting 3 teacher coding that we have to do, and CEDRA, special education data recording application. I would not be able to say special education data recording I just say CEDRA. And to understand all the acronyms, I have a business manager, and if I didn't have a business manager, Brenda Vietz, I could not do my job as a director. She does a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to make sure everything is done correctly, coded correctly. And this is just an example of the complexity of the codes. And then down below is MARS, automated data reporting system. Obviously, it starts with M for Minnesota. Wisconsin starts with W. Every state has their own. Iowa starts with I. And Laura's from Texas, so hers starts with T down in Texas. One more slide, just the UFARs is another thing we have to record information on, and these are similar codes. You'll see the 411 code stands for ASD again, and each category stands for something. It stands for a teacher, it stands for a paraprofessional, it stands for a bundle of paper that we order. Nursing supplies for our nurse's office is a tremendous amount of coding for all the different things that we code to nursing in Duluth Public Schools.
All right, so then there are some areas that we also receive reimbursement. These are funds essentially that we control the impact for. We have budgeted, or Simone budgets us, for $1.8 million this year. That's what she would like to see us bring in through medical assistance reimbursement. Currently, you'll see that we're running pretty short on that. In the past, last year we came very close to 1.8, which is why she set it as the target this year. But within this, there are eligible services that we can bill for. We have to have parental consent, and then the funds are used for operational and administrative costs. Much of it goes to our staffing and professional services, and then some of it goes to our specialized equipment. Jason, did you want to say any more about this?
Well, it's a really important part of our budget, and we highlighted a few examples how we could improve in this area. We do a really good job in setting 3 programs with our ASD and DCD population of kids. If they need help with toileting, feeding, personal cares, movement and things, of stretching and those types of things. Those are all things that the paraprofessionals that support the kiddos, we can get reimbursement on those activities of daily living for those kids. Where we could improve, I shared this with our resource group when we had a teacher group in front of us, the special education staff, that if there's behavior situations where every student probably has a high flyer in their building that's the most at-risk kid, that really takes a tremendous amount of energy from staff, and that could be paraprofessional staff that support that student all day long. Well, that could be a billable situation where we get reimbursement on that. Keeping a kid safe, keeping others from getting hurt, keeping the student from eloping from the building. Those are all things that we can bill on, and many kids were not billing like we should be. It's just as simple as doing a 10-day time sampling of your time and effort on that kiddo, making sure the correct words are in the IEP, and then we can bill on that particular student. And the reimbursement from our paraprofessional unit is the largest source of MA revenue for the district, but we're falling short in some areas where we could improve.
All right, we've talked about where the money comes from. We've kind of talked about where it goes, but where does the money, how is the money generated? And that's by our students. So we're going to go into the students that we serve. This is our department. Our department is comprised of the numbers you see there, the number of service providers. We have teachers, paras, related service providers, and then our admin staff. Salary and benefits account for 91% of our budget, and that is number 2 on our success criteria today. What is the most impactful item on our budget? Well, it is salary and benefits. And then finally, the remainder of our budget goes to some of those areas. Jason, did you have anything you wanted to add here?
Well, we received a lot of great questions, and I think we received some questions about that, the 91%. I can't remember what it is right now, Laura, but it is the largest factor that affects our budget. We don't spend a lot on even curriculum materials. We rely on the general education curriculum for the most part, but we have limited spending other than our staff within the special education budget. And this highlights the students by the numbers, so a number of SPED students that we have.
and then how they're served. Some of them are speech-only students, but then some of them are in resource. You'll see the numbers for setting 3 and 4. Those should be lower numbers because it is a more restrictive environment. And then our early childhood special education, our first students that we serve. Related services, our largest group that is served is through speech. Second largest is through social work. And then, of course, you'll see the others listed there. The numbers on the screen might be difficult for you to read, but what is important, I think, on this screen is down in the bottommost right-hand corner. And down there, you'll see that we serve in our district 2,200, almost 2,300 students on IEPs. If our district enrollment is at 8,000 and we're serving 2,300 students on IEPs, almost a quarter of our district enrollment is served in special education. We are disproportionate compared to the rest of the state in this area. Jason started this morning by highlighting some of the reasons why we have a higher enrollment, that this is an area that we continue to look at as far as our district impact, excuse me.
So when I started 16 years ago, we were hovering for several years at 1,400 students that had IEPs in Duluth Public Schools. And you can see that we have grown immensely in post-pandemic especially. But the 2,334 daily child count of students on IEPs right now is the largest that we've ever had in Duluth Public Schools. And again, I never want to, it hurts my ears for people to say we're overspending. We're responding to a need. We do have increased costs, but again, those are more and more kids on IEPs, more and more kids are qualifying, and we're getting some of the most at-risk students from our local surrounding schools are coming to Duluth Public Schools. That should be celebrated as a wonderful thing, not overspending.
I think if you walk away with anything today, this may be the most impactful of all. For every student that walks through our doors, the district receives $7,481. But if you're a student that walks through our doors and has an IEP, the average cost to serve you is $12,448. Now, we have some students that are less than that. We have some students that have services that are much higher than this $12,000. But the average student on an IEP costs the district about $12,000. And that gap between $7,000 and $12,000 is made up out of the general education budget. Every household has an income budget sheet, and this is ours. So you'll see our income there, and our total income amounts to about $34 million. However, our expenditures are greater than our income, and right now we are trending towards a budget shortfall of $7.5 million. And that is going back to how we started today, talking about the budgetary impacts and the need for some reductions, is because of this $7 million that we're currently in a budget shortfall of. And remember that with special education funding, we won't receive our current year spending for 2 years in the future.
Yeah, before you leave this, go back one slide. I remembered a great question that came up. So should the district never ask the special services department to come up with $1 million of reductions? Well, when you think about if we're increasing by $3 million, $4 million, and we tried to save $1 million, we would still meet maintenance of effort. I think the answer to that question is, can we provide adequate services if we cut $1 million? That's the impact. Are we going to keep our buildings safe? Are we going to be able to provide a quality education, supervising the classrooms and the activities that we need to cover? It is challenging to reduce the special services department by $1 million because we're not going to, if we maintain that student enrollment or increase student enrollment, we're not going to be able to meet the needs of the kids if we cut $1 million.
There are some areas that we control. Much of it, as we've discussed today, is out of our control. The 2-year lag, the state funding formula, the amount of money we receive from the federal government. But the areas that we can impact the budget are listed here, and these are just some of them. We talked about, Jason spoke to CEIS funds, and the fact that we are disproportionate with our suspension rates between our students of color and our white students. The state requires us to spend 50% of our funds to address that disproportionality. If we were able to address that within our district, that is money that would come back into our budget that we could use and would not impact the general ed, or that 15% coverage not need to come from the general education budget. MA reimbursement is we continue to find areas to maximize our reimbursement. This is an area that we control. And if all of our service providers that can bill will bill, this is money that we control. There's some areas within the IEP that we are disproportionate. As we've done some audits, we realized that transportation is one area, and it's just one area that we can control. And you'll note there that previously we were reimbursed for transportation, special education transportation, at 100%. Currently, we're receiving 95% reimbursement, but next year it's going to drop to 90% reimbursement. That's proposed by the legislation right now. Our expenditures have risen sharply over the past 5 years. There's a chart that Simone shared with us that indicates or highlights that 5 years ago, our special education transportation costs were at $800,000. That's the cost we were expending to transport students. Because we are transporting more students in the special education transportation, we've now risen over to, this year I believe we're going to spend about $2 million. So just a reminder to our staff that to qualify for special education transportation, the student must have a unique need. It has to be a data-driven decision. It has to be a team decision, and a reminder that it's a removal from general education. So we want to have all of our students on general education transportation to the maximum extent possible with their peers. And we will continue to discuss this, provide professional development and training over this area of the IEP in the next year. And then finally, we added ESY here just as an area. We are mandated to provide ESY services. Several years ago, I want to say perhaps 3, we did reduce the number of weeks, and that did have a positive impact on our budget. We do, however, want to emphasize that we want to serve kids, we want to provide the ESY services, and so we are mandated to do that. We just looked for ways that we could impact that budgetary expense.
Before you leave the slide, let me just add a little clarity on that top point, the CEIS. We're spending that, and this is federal funds, so it's 100% reimbursing 6 positions right now. And if we didn't have the disproportionate suspension project, we could spend those dollars differently, which would take for example, the Native American advocates, if we went back and paid for those positions. They're currently being paid for out of state funding sources, which includes that's 40% paid for by general ed funds. And then that would save the district some money to not have to spend those positions out of that source of money, and it could switch it over to CEIS. So just hopefully adding some more clarity about what we were talking about, changing that funding stream.
Okay. All right, that brings us to the end of our presentation today. And just a reminder, our learning intention today was to share information regarding the various funding streams that comprise special education funding, and how those services, special education services, impact the general education budget. We talked about 3 funding streams, and those in brief are the federal funds, the state funds, and various, we called them specialized funding. The largest single factor impacting the special education budget was our FTE, our budget costs for salaries and payroll. and benefits. And then why are special education services impacting the general education budget? Well, that's because the state doesn't reimburse us for our current costs for almost 2 years. And the gap between serving a general education student and a student with an IEP is about, as we highlighted, I think $5,000. That $5,000 comes out of or is supported through the general education budget. Jason, did you have anything to add here?
Oh, I think you covered it. And yes, you passed your quiz yet again, Laura. Nice job.
Thank you. Jason and I are always available to answer questions. The special education funding and budget funding in the state of Minnesota is very, very complex. What we've just tried to highlight are the main causes and give you a bird's eye view of what is impacting the general education budget when it comes to special education. Thank you.
Thanks for your time today.